Yeah. Well, good morning. We're glad you're here today. We are in a series of lessons about life's interruptions and how to handle them. Last week we talked about when God interrupts. We talked about Abram, which would become Abraham, and how God took him from one place, didn't tell him where he was going, but God did a great thing there. And one of the lessons in that was that Abraham never got to see, he never owned any of the land that God told him he would, except for a little burial plot. But God God plays the long game. He's looking at eternity there. Today we're going to see Joseph today. We're going to look at that a little bit. And this is when life goes terribly wrong. When life goes terribly wrong. And it's one of those things that seems like everything that can go wrong will go wrong. And we're going to jump around, but I think we're going to start in Genesis chapter maybe 39, somewhere in there. And verse 21, we're going to hit some of the high points or maybe low points of Joseph's life. While you're turning or tapping to get there, there was a very interesting illustration in the book, and it was about how when a baby giraffe is born. And to be honest with you, 62 years now, I don't think I've ever considered that. Never even thought about how a baby giraffe is born. But giraffes are pretty tall, and said that little baby will actually fall about 10 feet. The giraffes don't lay down when the baby's born. That it'll fall about 10 feet. It'll hit the ground, and it starts trying to get up. So you know what the mother does while the baby's trying to stand up? She kicks it. Yeah, she kicks it, knocks it down. And it tries to stand up again, and she will kick it again. And then when it finally stands up on those little wobbly legs and things, she'll kick it down again. And she keeps kicking it down. And here's why. That may seem cruel to you, but a giraffe has no defenses very much. And as long as that baby is on the ground, any predator can take that baby's life. And that mother knows that. So that mother knows that she has to instill in that baby immediately when it's born, you get up. You keep getting up. You must get up. You've got to get up. No matter what, you keep getting up. Sometimes it's tough when God's trying to instill in us that idea, you got to get up. Yeah, I know you're down. I know things are going terribly wrong for you. I know things are awful, but you got to get up. You got to get up. And the quicker we learn that, I won't say the easier it is, but it can be endured a little bit better, I think. Let's take a look at Joseph. We'll start in verse, 21, I think is where we're going to start at. There we go. It says, "But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison." Now let's do a little background. You know the story. You talk about a dysfunctional family. I mean, they could have been a reality series and it would have been a hit now. Okay, and just remind you, remember, Joseph's daddy married his mother's sister by accident, spent 1 week on the honeymoon, then turned around and married his mother. Okay, oh yeah, it gets better. Evidently, they wasn't having enough kids, so Joseph's mother took her servant and said, "Here, you have a child with her." And then Joseph's stepmother, his aunt, which was his stepmother, did this same thing, So by the time Joseph hits this family, I think he's number 11 or somewhere around in there. He's got 10 older brothers. It's just, goodness, it's a crazy family. And to top it off, Joseph was the favorite of his father. And it wasn't those where they kind of keep it secret. Oh, no. His father let everybody know Joseph was his favorite. Even give him a coat of many colors. It's like having a uniform that says, "I'm the favorite." Okay? The other thing it did is he put him over his brothers. Now that's the eldest son's position. But Joseph's dad gave it to him. And by the way, think about it now. He's number 11. This is not like they were real close in age and I skipped over one. No, he skipped over 10 sons to put Joseph in charge. So and to top it off, Joseph had a dream one day that basically said even his father and mother would bow down to him or he would rule over them. And he didn't keep that to himself. He told his brothers, and that was probably the straw that broke the camel's back. So his brothers sold him into slavery. Whew, life goes terribly wrong, right? He gets into Egypt. He winds up in a household, but he makes the best of it. And he does well. So well that his master puts him in charge of the whole house. Doesn't even care what he does. gives him charge of the bank accounts and everything, just lets him go. Things are going pretty well, I guess as well as it can be if you're a slave. And then Joseph's falsely accused of rape. Nobody comes to his aid and says, wait a minute, something's wrong here. This guy's been, nope. And he gets thrown in prison, and that's where we pick it up. He is in prison for something he didn't do. He's been sold into slavery, all of those things. So his life is terribly wrong, okay? Terribly wrong. And the first phrase in verse 21 says, but the Lord was with Joseph. You know, right off the bat, you have to understand your circumstances do not dictate whether or not God's with you. You know, sometimes we feel like if we're in terrible, position or we're in bad shape or things, well, God must not be with me. God must not, but God's not, looking. God doesn't. No, God was with him all along. Even though he's been kicked down, I don't know how many times, God was with him and showed him mercy. I'm guessing prison wasn't the place you wanted to be in those days. Terrible. And by the way, he's in prison for rape. You say, well, he didn't do anything. They don't care. That's what he was charged with. That's why he's there. So he's in prison for rape. He should have been killed. But God showed him mercy and gave him favor inside of the keeper of the prison. Joseph should have been treated horribly in that prison. But yet, things are going to go well. He's not treated horribly. Matter of fact, he's treated rather well. It says the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. So Joseph pretty much took care of everything. All the prisoners, he put them in the cells they needed to be in. He took care of everything. Now, why would God do this? Well, God uses things in our lives. I'm not saying God makes everything happen to you, but God can use anything that's happened. Joseph, he learned a lot about human resources, HR people. He had to deal with prisoners, and he had to keep them all in line. So that means some he had to say, hey, listen, you need to do better. Some he had to threaten. But that's something he would use later. Remember, he's going to be the ruler of Egypt one day, pretty much so. I mean, he's pretty much going to have everything. He learned how to deal with people in prison. He probably learned how to deal with budgets and buying materials and selling and all that kind of stuff, either in prison or where he was at before that. So God's used all of these things that's happening to Joseph to further his will. In verse 23, it says, the keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. You can prosper in any situation. I don't know how you prosper in prison, but Joseph did. Prospered. Not necessarily financially, but God used this time to show people that he was doing a great work here. And the keeper of the prison, there's no indication that he's a believer in any shape, form, or fashion, but he recognized something's different about that boy. When God's with you, people should recognize there's something different about you. You've been kicked down a lot, but you're not reacting like everybody else reacts. You're handling it different. Something's different about that. When we're in some of our most difficult times, that's when God really shapes us and molds us. Brother Steve's talking about the potter today and the clay, but this is when God shapes us and molds us. Charles Spurgeon had on his wall in his bedroom a plaque with Isaiah 48:10 on it. And these words, I have chosen thee in the furnace of affliction. He says, God's choice makes chosen men choice men. We are chosen not in the palace, but in the furnace. Sometimes God does his best work in the furnace. Bless his heart, that's where Joseph is. He is being purified. Now, once again, you can look at that and say, well, none of this is Joseph's fault. My guess is Joseph was a little low on humility when he was at home. He probably took this favorite son thing, he might have took it to an extreme a time or two. By the time he gets to be ruler of Egypt, or over pretty much all of Egypt, he's a different man, I think. God's using this to refine him and to make him stronger. Well, let's take a look at the next section. We're also going to see that God can use him in any situation. It says, and they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man in his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of the dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in the prison. All right, time's gone by. We're in a different chapter now. Joseph's doing his work in prison. He's just doing what he's supposed to do. And one night, two men show up in prison, the butler and the baker. Pharaoh, or the king of Egypt, it says here, probably Pharaoh, had gotten mad at them, threw them both in prison. And they dreamed a dream. Uh-oh. Now, this has got nothing to do with Joseph, right? Well, maybe it does. This is not any indication. I mean, he didn't have any hand in this. And I guess what I want you to see is that sometimes when we're in the furnace, when we're in prison, we need to pay attention to people around us. Even though their situation, you say, well, that's got nothing to do. I didn't have nothing to do with that. I've never been to the palace. I don't know what. God's going to use it in a great way. So Joseph took an interest here. And in verse 6, I believe, let's see where we're at here. It says, and Joseph came into them in the morning and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. They're sad, that means troubled. It could mean angry, but they're terrified is what it is. When the king of Egypt, or Pharaoh, when he's mad at you, this ain't good, okay? They know the consequence. They know they could both die that day, so they are sad. But Joseph came to them. He went to them. Let's just be blunt about this. Who cares about prisoners? A lot of people don't. A lot of people couldn't care less about somebody in prison. But Joseph uses this time to look at them. He took notice of their situation. Sometimes God uses us in difficult times to take notice of somebody else's situation that's just like ours. We would have never noticed it before. Would Joseph have noticed these two men if he was still in Potiphar's house as head of the household type thing? Probably not. Wouldn't have thought about it. But now Joseph's been in prison for a year or two, and he knows what that's like. When he sees these two men, he has compassion on them. He feels for them, in other words. So he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of the Lord's house, saying, wherefore look ye so sadly today? Why are you sad, is what he's saying. Well, duh, I'm in prison. You know, not too many people go to prison with excitement and going, whoo, I can't wait to get there. Maybe I'll see my relatives or something, yeah. But he looks at him and says, why are you so sad? Why is things, why are you this way? He took an interest in them. That's huge right there, okay? Even in our trials and trouble, we can still have an interest in other people. Andrew Murray says this, he says, in trial and weakness and trouble, God seeks to bring us low until we learn that his grace is all, and to take pleasure in the very thing that brings us and keeps us low. His strength is made perfect in our weakness, his presence filling and satisfying our emptiness, because the secret of humility that need never fail becomes the secret of humility that never fails. He's saying, listen, accept where you're at and do the best you can there. Just accept where you're at and do the best you can. As Gideons, we get testimonies all the time about men in prison, men that are there and never getting out. And they turn their life over to God and they do the best they can where they're at. They begin to preach in prison, knowing they're never going to get out. Joseph is looking, now Joseph has no idea that he might get out of prison one day. No idea. But he looked at them and said, why are you sad? Well, they told him. They said unto him, we have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me then, I pray you. Interesting here. First of all, notice their situation. We've dreamed a dream, and nobody can interpret it. There's no hope for us. No hope. There's people around you every day that has no hope. No hope at all. Sometimes they're in trouble. They got no hope. Sometimes life's going pretty good, but they still got no hope. These two men had no hope, none whatsoever. Nobody could help them. And then what does Joseph say? Do not interpretations belong to God? I find that interesting. This young man has been kicked so many times. He's been sold into slavery. He's been falsely accused of rape. All of those things, and yet he still depends on God. He said, wait a minute, doesn't God do this? This is God's stuff. He didn't say, I'll tell you what your dreams are. He might have been tempted to bargain with him. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll tell you what your dream is. If you'll promise when you get out, you say something to Pharaoh, you say something to the king of Egypt. He didn't do that. He said, don't dreams belong to God, interpretations? He said, tell me, I'll tell you what God says. he points them to God because that's where our hope is. Our hope is always in God. Joseph's circumstances didn't change how he treated people. He's treating them with compassion. They can't do anything for Joseph, but he's treating them with compassion. So that's interesting. All right. Well, let's move on. Let's look at the last part now. Let's go over to chapter 41. And just quickly through a few verses here. It says, Pharaoh was wroth with his servants and put me in the ward and the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream in one night, I and he, and we dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. Now here's what's happened. Joseph told them their dream. Basically told one of them, said, hey, you're going to be restored. The butler said, you're going to be back. You're going to be standing by Pharaoh. And he gave him his cup. Some people believe that this is the guy that Pharaoh trusted and that he would take a sip of the drink first to make sure it wasn't poison. Then he would hand it to Pharaoh. After Pharaoh looked, he didn't fall over dead, Pharaoh would drink, whatever. So it was a very trusted position. Joseph said, you're going to be back in that position. And then the baker said, oh, well, tell me what my dream means. Joseph said, sometime today your head's going to be removed from your shoulders. Not so good for you. And that's exactly what happened. The butler was restored back to his former position. The baker was put to death. So now Pharaoh's had a dream. And Pharaoh can't interpret the dream, and nobody can. He brings everybody in, and nobody can interpret the dream, and that's where we pick it up there in verse 10. Pharaoh was wroth. He's ticked off at everybody. This is not a good day. If Pharaoh's mad, somebody's going to have to pay for this. And finally, after all these years, and I say years, probably one or two, I don't know, the butler, remember, he was supposed to put in a good word for Joseph, but he forgot. And now he remembers, wait a minute. And he tells him, there was a time when we were in jail, we were in the ward, and me and the chief baker, and we dreamed dreams, and we didn't know what they were, but somebody told us the interpretation of them. Verses 12 and 13, and there was with us a young man, a Hebrew, a servant to the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream he did interpret, and it came to pass as he interpreted to us. So it was. Me, he restored into mine office, and him he hanged. He said, I remember now. It's amazing. He knew it. He knew exactly what was going to happen. Interestingly enough, first time the word Hebrew is used here, I believe. Remember, this is long before the children of Israel went to conquer the promised land, so this may be the first time the word Hebrew is used here. It means from the other side of Jordan, or maybe a descendant of Eber or Eber, something like that. But he said, this young man, said he knew and said he was right. He was spot on. He did exactly, and it was exactly like he said. Maybe he can help. So what do we do next? Verse 14, then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came into Pharaoh. It's amazing how God works. If you're in prison and you don't think you need to be there, you're doing everything you can to get out. You're spending every penny you've got on lawyers. You're filing every motion you can. And hopefully, finally, somebody will listen to you and you might get out of jail or out of prison. That's not the situation. It's reversed. Joseph didn't have any money. He's a slave. He had no way to get out of prison. He is there, literally, he's there till he dies. That's it. He'll be there for the rest of his life. But all of a sudden, probably the one guy that could get him out, Pharaoh, king, whatever, he says, you go bring me Joseph. It's amazing how God works. God used probably the one person that could get Joseph. Remember, Joseph's in prison for rape. You say, he didn't do it. No, that doesn't matter. The verdict's already been passed. He's in there for rape. Do you take somebody who's in prison for rape and bring him into your house? Pharaoh did. Brought him out hastily, quickly. Get him out here. So what did he do? He shaved and changed his raiment. You need to be ready. No matter what we're in, no matter what terrible situation we're in, no matter how bad it is, when God's ready for us to step out of that situation, we need to be ready. No doubt here. By the way, Joseph's going to be asked to interpret Pharaoh's dream. If he's wrong, what happens? Oh, he's dead. Yeah. Yeah, he's already in prison. So, I mean, we're not throwing him back in prison. He's dead. But he's ready. He's prepared. Why? Because his relationship with God has been building all of this time. He didn't turn his back on God. He didn't say, God, that's not fair. That's not fair, God, what I've been through. That's not right. My brothers should be in prison, not me. No. He just trusted God. And remember now, keep this in mind too. This is very important. Pharaoh doesn't know anything about Joseph. If Joseph had not had compassion on those two men in prison. Two men in prison, Joseph has compassion on them, says, why are you sad? All of that leads to Pharaoh now saying, you go get that boy and bring him to me. Sir, he's not a wild, I don't care, you bring him to me. But sir, he's in there for rape. Hey, go get him now. I want him right here in front of me. Nothing could stop God's plan at this point. Pharaoh is being a pawn of God. He doesn't even know it. When we're in difficult situations, when life goes terribly wrong, just remember God's there. He's with us all the time. I'll close with this one right here. This is in the 1800s, somewhere in Dublin. There was a group of ladies who was doing a Bible study, and they came across Malachi 3:3. And they looked at the first part of that, and this is what they were confused about. It says, and he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. Now, that's the part of the verse they were really stuck on there. And the word that got them was the part where it says, he shall sit as a refiner of silver. They said, shouldn't he be doing something? Shouldn't he be working with it? Shouldn't he be preparing the fire? Shouldn't he be doing something? Why is he just sitting there? And one of them said, well, I'll go talk to a silversmith and I'll find out. So she did. She began to ask him the different things about all that. He began to tell her all the things that went on. And finally she said, but sir, do you sit while the work of refining is going on? Here's what he said. He said, oh, yes, madam. I must sit with my eye steadily fixed on the furnace. For if the time necessary for refining be exceeded in the slightest degree, the silver is sure to be injured. Now you understand. You say, I don't think God's active in my situation. It's a terrible, could be God sitting and watching. Because just like that, he knows he will not leave you in that situation for 1 second longer than is needed to refine us. Just like the silversmith there. He knows that. Something else, you know how they know when the refining process is complete? When they can see their image in the silver. That's a good point. How long are we going to have to be in this terrible situation, this trial that we're going through? Well, two things about that. You can be confident that God is watching. And he's not going to allow you to be there any longer than what he's decided. And the second thing is, we may be there until we begin to look like the image of God. It's a good lesson when things go terribly wrong. Joseph did come out of that prison, literally woke up in jail that morning, and probably before nightfall was sitting as the most powerful man in Egypt, and would be that for the rest of his life. So God may be sending you through a difficult trial, but just remember, he's got something important or something great he wants to do with that. Well, next week, we'll look at when our actions, when our actions cause an interruption. That'll be in Exodus chapter 21. We'll start there. Let's have a word of prayer. We'll go. Father, I do thank you. Thank you that your eye is always on us. Even when we're in those terrible situations, the things we don't understand. We can't understand why it's happening to us when it seems that somebody else has caused this problem and we want it to happen to them. We just need to be mindful that you've got your eye on us. And maybe like Joseph, maybe you're building in some humility that we need. Maybe you're teaching us to have compassion on people in a similar situation that before we never would have noticed, Lord. All of those things, whatever it is, help us to learn that lesson quickly and so that we can become closer to your image and you can use us in a greater way. Father, we ask that your spirit would be strong today, that it be unhindered. It moves in the worship service and in the night service all the way through every age group, that your will would be done. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
You thought it. You went ahead and said it. Yeah, you did.